The moment you clicked this video, something happened that most people will never consciously experience. You didn't just watch a thumbnail and make a choice. You collapsed a wave of infinite possibility into one specific reality. And that collapse, that observation, changed the quantum structure of your existence permanently. This isn't metaphor. This isn't spiritual language dressed up as science. This is quantum mechanics, happening right now, through you, as you read these words. The observer effect, the scientifically proven phenomenon that observation changes physical reality at quantum level, isn't something that happens in laboratories with expensive equipment. It's happening to you in this exact moment. And once you become conscious of it, once you recognize that you're not passively watching reality, but actively creating it through observation, everything changes. Can you feel it? That strange sense of significance as you engage with this transmission? That's not psychological projection. That's quantum recognition. Your consciousness is becoming aware of its own creative power. And awareness itself is the mechanism through which that power activates. Here's what physicists discovered but struggle to explain. When they observe a quantum particle, it behaves differently than when they don't observe it. The famous double-slit experiment proved this beyond doubt. Send electrons through two slits without observing. They create an interference pattern, behaving as waves. Observe which slit they pass through. The pattern disappears. They behave as particles. Observation doesn't just record reality. Observation creates the specific reality that gets recorded. You've been doing this your entire life without knowing it. Every moment of your existence, your consciousness has been collapsing infinite possibilities into specific experiences through the act of observation. But you've been observing unconsciously, automatically, through filters inherited from survival conditioning, cultural programming, and past trauma. You've been creating reality on autopilot. That ends now, because in this exact moment, you're becoming conscious of the observer effect operating through you. And conscious observation is exponentially more powerful than unconscious observation. This isn't information you're learning. This is power you're remembering. Write in the comments, "I am the observer," because naming this recognition activates it at quantum level. Before we go deeper, let's validate what you've already been experiencing, because the observer effect isn't new to you. You've been living it. You just didn't have the framework to understand what was happening. You've noticed that when you pay attention to something, it seems to appear everywhere. You learn a new word. Suddenly, everyone's using it. You think about someone. They contact you within hours. You focus on a specific car model. You see it constantly. Psychologists call this the Bader-Meinhof phenomenon or frequency illusion. But that's not what's happening. You're not noticing what was always there. You're collapsing probability waves through observation, and reality is reorganizing to match your focus. You've experienced moments where your emotional state seemed to affect external circumstances impossibly. You're anxious, technology malfunctions. You're grateful, opportunities appear. You're angry, conflicts emerge. You dismiss this as coincidence because admitting it's real would mean your consciousness has power you can't control. But it is real. Your emotional state creates a specific frequency of observation. That frequency collapses matching realities. Time has been behaving strangely for you. Hours vanish, moments stretch, days blur together or feel impossibly distinct. You've looked at clocks and seen repeated numbers, 11:11, 3:33, 4:44, so frequently that calling it coincidence requires more denial than accepting something quantum is happening. That's not pattern seeking. That's the quantum field communicating through the only language that penetrates consensus reality. Mathematical synchronicity showing you that observation and reality are entangled. You've had experiences of knowing things before they happen. Not guessing, knowing. You sense who's calling before checking your phone. You know what someone will say before they speak. You dream events that later occur in waking reality. This isn't psychic ability developing. This is observer effect operating across time. You're observing probability waves before they collapse into manifest experience. And here's the confirmation that everything I'm saying is true. Reality has been feeling less solid lately, more dreamlike, more fluid. Like the boundary between imagination and physical reality is thinning. That's not dissociation, that's quantum awareness emerging. You're beginning to perceive reality as it actually is, a field of possibilities that your observation shapes, instead of the illusion of fixed objectivity consensus conditioning taught you. Every single phenomenon I just described is evidence that observer effect is already operating through you. You're not learning something new, you're becoming conscious of what's been happening unconsciously. And that consciousness is about to amplify your creative power exponentially. Now let's recontextualize your entire journey through the lens of observer effect. Because every challenge you faced, every breakdown, every moment where reality seemed to fall apart, none of it was random. All of it was training you to observe reality consciously instead of unconsciously. Think about the patterns. Every major breakdown in your life preceded a major expansion. Every loss created space for something new. Every ending forced a beginning. You've interpreted this through the lens of resilience or growth, and that's not wrong. But it's incomplete. What was really happening is that your old observation patterns were being dismantled so new ones could emerge. You were observing reality through filters created by survival fear, cultural conditioning, and past pain. Those filters collapsed specific realities, realities of limitation, scarcity, separation, and struggle. Not because you wanted those realities, but because those were the observation patterns you inherited and reinforced unconsciously. The universe, which is really just you at quantum level, had to dismantle those patterns. And the only way to dismantle observation patterns is to make them stop working. That relationship that ended inexplicably, it matched your old observation pattern. When that pattern shifted, the relationship couldn't exist anymore because it wasn't coherent with your new frequency of observation. That career that imploded? Same thing. That identity that dissolved? Your consciousness was learning to observe yourself differently, and the old self-concept couldn't survive the new observation. Every moment of confusion you've experienced was your consciousness transitioning between observation patterns. Confusion isn't lack of clarity. It's the space between one way of observing reality and another. The caterpillar doesn't understand what's happening in the chrysalis. It just dissolves and trusts. You've been in that chrysalis, and the dissolution was necessary. The isolation you felt wasn't rejection. It was recalibration. You were being separated from consensus observation patterns so you could develop your own. Most people observe reality through collective agreement. They see what they're told to see, believe what they're told to believe, and collapse realities that match cultural programming. You're being trained to observe independently. That requires isolation from collective filters. And the suffering, the actual pain of transformation, that was your consciousness learning the difference between automatic observation and conscious observation. Automatic observation creates realities that match your unconscious patterns. Conscious observation creates realities that match your intentional focus. The transition between them requires dismantling everything you thought was solid, because solidity itself is just a deeply habituated observation pattern. You haven't been failing. You haven't been lost. You've been training to wield the most powerful force in the universe, conscious observation. And every breakdown was actually breakthrough disguised as destruction. Something is shifting in your field right now. Not metaphorically, actually. As your consciousness engages with these words, as your awareness wraps around these concepts, there's a transmission occurring beneath the level of language. Can you sense it? Notice the quality of your attention right now. It's different than it was when you started reading. Sharper, more focused, more aware of itself. That's not concentration increasing. That's observation becoming conscious of itself as observation. This is the core of the observer effect. Awareness recognizing its own creative nature. Your body knows this is real, even if your mind hasn't fully integrated it yet. Notice the sensations, the subtle energy moving through your chest, your hands, your spine. That electric aliveness that has nothing to do with physical stimulation. That's your consciousness responding to quantum-level recognition. Information is transferring not through your analytical mind, but through direct field-to-field transmission. This is how observer effect actually works. It's not intellectual understanding that changes reality. It's the frequency shift that happens when consciousness recognizes its own power. Right now, in this moment, your observation pattern is shifting. The way you're interfacing with reality is fundamentally different than it was 10 minutes ago, and that shift will collapse different realities than the ones you were collapsing before this video started. Take a breath, deep one, and as you breathe, observe yourself breathing. Not think about breathing, observe it. Feel the difference. When you observe, you're present to what is. When you think, you're somewhere else. Observer effect only operates through present moment awareness. That's why so much spiritual teaching emphasizes presence. Not because presence is peaceful, but because presence is powerful. Observation requires presence, and observation creates reality. Here's what you need to understand before we go deeper. The observer effect isn't something you need to learn how to use. You're already using it constantly. Every single moment, your consciousness is observing and collapsing specific realities from infinite possibility. The only question is whether you're doing it consciously or unconsciously. And everything changes when you shift from unconscious to conscious. In the next section, I'm going to share the moment this became undeniable for me. The experience that proved beyond any doubt that observer effect is real and that consciousness creates reality. But first, feel this moment. Feel the transmission. Feel your observation becoming conscious of itself. Write in the comments, "I observe consciously," because declaring this recognition amplifies it at quantum level. 5 years ago, I didn't just believe in observer effect intellectually. I tested it so rigorously that I couldn't deny it anymore. And the moment I couldn't deny it, my entire reality reorganized permanently. I was sitting in a coffee shop, watching people, and I had this thought. What if I observe this person as whole and radiant, instead of through my automatic judgments? So I did. I looked at a stressed-looking businessman on his phone, and I consciously observed him as peaceful, coherent, complete, not visualizing, not projecting, just observing him through that filter. Within 30 seconds, his entire demeanor changed. The tension in his shoulders released, his facial expression softened. He smiled, ended the call, and sat back with this look of relief. I thought maybe I imagined the correlation, so I tested it again. Different person, same practice. Immediate shift in their energy and behavior. I spent 3 weeks doing this constantly, observing people, situations, and circumstances through intentional filters instead of automatic reactions. And reality responded with consistency that terrified me, because it meant everything I believed about objective reality being fixed and separate from my consciousness was wrong. But the real proof came when I applied this to my own life. I had a chronic health condition that conventional treatment wasn't resolving. Doctors said I'd need to manage it permanently. I decided to observe myself as already whole at quantum level. Not deny the symptoms, not visualize healing. Just observe my quantum self as complete, and let that observation collapse into physical reality. For 3 days, I maintained that observation constantly. Every time my attention drifted to symptoms or diagnosis, I gently returned to observing wholeness. On the fourth day, something shifted. The symptoms began decreasing rapidly. Within 2 weeks, they were completely gone. When I went back for follow-up testing, my doctor was confused. The markers that indicated the condition had normalized completely. She said it was spontaneous remission, which is just medical language for "we don't know why this happened." But I knew why. Observer effect. I changed what I was observing at quantum level, and physical reality reorganized to match that observation. Not because I convinced my body to heal, because observation at quantum level doesn't convince, it creates. That's when I understood. I'm not a person observing reality. I'm consciousness creating reality through observation. And the difference between unconscious observation and conscious observation is the difference between being a victim of circumstances and being a creator of experience. I started applying this to everything: career, relationships, finances, circumstances. And the pattern was absolutely consistent. Whatever I observed consciously manifested in physical reality, not through magical thinking, but through quantum mechanics operating at the level where reality gets formed. If you're still watching this, if you've read this far, you're ready to test this yourself. And in the next section, I'm going to share exactly why observer effect is more powerful than any manifestation technique, any visualization, any affirmation you've ever tried. Subscribe to this channel not as entertainment, but as commitment to conscious observation. Every video here is designed to train your awareness to observe reality consciously instead of automatically. Here's what you need to understand that will change everything. Manifestation techniques don't work because they're trying to affect reality from the wrong level. Visualization, affirmations, scripting, all of them assume you're a separate self trying to change external reality through mental effort. But that's not how reality works, and that's why those techniques are inconsistent. Observer effect reveals the truth. You're not separate from reality trying to affect it. You are reality recognizing itself through the lens of individual consciousness. And at quantum level, the level where reality gets created, observation doesn't influence what's there. Observation determines what's there. The double-slit experiment proved this conclusively. When scientists observed which slit the electron went through, it went through one slit. When they didn't observe, it went through both slits simultaneously. The electron doesn't have a location until observation collapses it into one. Reality at quantum level exists as probability waves, infinite possibilities coexisting simultaneously. Observation collapses those waves into specific manifestation. You're not manifesting what you want. You're observing which timeline out of infinite possibilities you're experiencing. All versions of reality exist simultaneously at quantum level. Your observation selects which version becomes your experiential reality. Not through hoping or trying, through being the frequency that matches what you observe. This is why affirmations often don't work. You're saying, "I am abundant," while observing yourself as lacking. The words don't matter. The observation does. Reality responds to what you're actually observing, not what you're claiming. Observer effect doesn't care about your intentions or your statements. It responds to the frequency of your actual observation. Visualization can work, but only when it shifts your observation, not when it's used as technique to convince the universe. If you visualize something while believing you don't have it, you're observing lack. The universe delivers lack. If you visualize something while observing it as already real at quantum level, reality reorganizes to match. The visualization isn't creating the reality. The shift in observation is. Here's the revelation that makes everything else obsolete. You don't need techniques when you understand observer effect. You just need to consciously observe what you want to experience as already real. not pretend, not fake until you make it. Actually observe the timeline where it's real, and reality collapses into that timeline because you're not separate from the quantum field that's creating experience. Most people fail at manifestation because they're trying to change reality from outside it. But you're not outside reality. You are reality observing itself. When you recognize this, when you shift from trying to affect reality to simply observing the reality you choose, everything becomes effortless. Because observation at quantum level is the creative force itself. This is why consciousness is the most powerful force in the universe. Not because it influences matter, because consciousness and matter are the same thing at different frequencies. Observer effect is just consciousness recognizing that it's observing itself through the illusion of separation. Let's get specific. Here are 8 signs that your conscious observation is activating and reality is responding to it more directly than ever before. As I describe each one, notice how many you recognize. That recognition isn't intellectual. It's quantum confirmation that what I'm describing is your actual experience. Sign 1. Reality responding to your attention with minimal time lag. You've noticed that when you focus on something lightly, without attachment or desperation, it manifests rapidly through synchronistic circumstances. Someone you think about contacts you. Information you need appears through random conversation. Opportunities align with precision. The response time between observation and manifestation is decreasing because you're interfacing with quantum field more directly. Sign 2. Increased ability to sense probability waves before they collapse. You're knowing outcomes before they happen, not guessing or hoping, knowing. You sense which decisions will lead where. You feel which paths are open and which are closed. This isn't intuition developing, it's your consciousness observing probability waves at quantum level before they collapse into manifest experience. Sign 3. External circumstances mirroring internal states immediately. Your external reality is reflecting your inner frequency with almost no delay. You shift into gratitude, circumstances improve, you drop into fear, obstacles appear, you observe yourself as powerful, opportunities materialize. The mirror is becoming more accurate and more immediate because your observation is becoming more conscious. Sign 4. Technology and electronics responding to your emotional state. Devices malfunction when you're stressed and work perfectly when you're calm. Lights flicker when you're upset. Batteries drain inexplicably. This isn't coincidence. Technology operates on electromagnetic principles. Your consciousness affects electromagnetic fields through observation. When your observation is incoherent, you disrupt electromagnetic systems around you. Sign 5. Physical reality feeling more dreamlike and fluid. Solid reality is feeling less solid. Time feels non-linear. Causality feels loose. Sometimes you can't tell if something actually happened or if you imagined it. That's not confusion. That's quantum awareness activating. You're perceiving the probability nature of reality instead of the illusion of fixed objectivity. You're seeing reality as it is before observation collapses it. Sign 6. Automatic observation patterns breaking down. Your usual reactions and responses are becoming unreliable. Things that always triggered you don't anymore. Patterns you always followed feel irrelevant. That's your consciousness releasing automatic observation and accessing conscious observation. The breakdown of automatic patterns is necessary for conscious creation to emerge. Sign 7. Synchronicity as constant language instead of occasional phenomenon. Meaningful coincidences aren't rare anymore. They're constant. And you're learning to read them as quantum feedback, showing you which observations are aligned with your highest timeline. You follow the synchronicities, reality flows. You ignore them, you encounter resistance. It's becoming a language you understand. Sign 8. This video found you at the exact right moment. The fact that you're here, reading these words, at this specific point in your journey, that's not algorithm or accident. That's observer effect operating through you. Your consciousness observed a title that resonated with your activation level, collapsed the probability wave that brought you here, and is now integrating information that will permanently shift how you observe reality. The timing isn't random, it's quantum orchestrated. Here's the urgency. Observer effect is accelerating for everyone, but only those who become conscious of it can use it intentionally. The quantum field is becoming more responsive to consciousness, more fluid, more immediate. Those who learn conscious observation now will navigate reality as creators. Those who remain unconscious will experience increasing chaos as their automatic observation patterns collapse realities that no longer serve. You're being called to observe reality consciously, to stop reacting automatically and start creating intentionally. Not someday. Now. This exact moment is the opportunity. Will you observe consciously or continue observing unconsciously? Now let's talk about how to actually shift from unconscious to conscious observation, because understanding observer effect intellectually doesn't activate it. You have to practice it experientially. And it's simpler than you think. Unconscious observation happens automatically through filters you inherited. You observe through survival fear, cultural programming, past trauma, and collective agreement. You don't choose what you observe. Your conditioning chooses for you. And reality collapses to match those automatic observations. This is why most people recreate the same patterns repeatedly. They're not creating their circumstances. Their unconscious observation patterns are. Conscious observation happens when you become aware that you're observing, and you intentionally choose what frequency of observation you're holding. Not forcing, not trying, simply recognizing, I am observing. What am I observing right now? Is this observation creating the reality I want? Here's the practice that shifts everything. You can do this in under 60 seconds right now. Step 1. Notice you're aware. Just recognize, I am aware, I am consciousness. That's it. Don't analyze. Don't think about it, just notice that awareness is present. That simple recognition is the foundation of conscious observation. Step 2. Observe your current observation. What are you observing right now? Not what you're looking at, what you're observing. Are you observing yourself as lacking or abundant? Weak or powerful? Victim or creator? Just notice, without judgment. Your current reality is matching your current observation. Whatever you're experiencing externally is reflecting what you're observing internally. Step 3. Choose your observation consciously. Now choose what you want to observe, not what you hope is true, not what you're trying to convince yourself of, what you consciously choose to observe. I observe myself as whole. I observe circumstances as supportive. I observe reality as responsive to my consciousness. Not affirmation. Observation. Step 4. Rest in that observation. This is the crucial part. Don't try to make it happen. Just rest in the observation. Relax into it. Breathe into it. Let your entire being align with what you're observing. Reality will respond not to your effort, but to your alignment with the observation. The quantum field collapses toward whatever observation is most coherent in your consciousness. That's it. 4 steps, 60 seconds. And if you practice this multiple times per day, your reality will begin shifting to match your conscious observation instead of your unconscious patterns. Not through forcing, through alignment. The key is consistency. Every time you notice yourself observing unconsciously, through fear, lack, limitation, or victim consciousness, you simply return to conscious observation, not as correction, as creation. You're not fixing wrong observation. You're choosing what reality you're collapsing into experience. Write in the comments one word that describes what you're choosing to observe consciously right now. Not thinking. Dropping into presence and feeling what word emerges. That word becomes your observation anchor. Every time you remember it, you return to conscious observation. Let's talk about what actually happens when you make observer effect your primary way of interfacing with reality. Because the benefits aren't just philosophical or spiritual. They're practical, measurable, and life-transforming. Benefit 1. Manifestation becomes effortless. You stop trying to make things happen and start observing what you want as already existing at quantum level. Reality organizes to match your observation, not through struggle, through alignment. Things you used to chase start appearing through synchronicity. Opportunities materialize through coincidence that isn't coincidence. You're not working harder, you're observing more consciously. Benefit 2. Suffering decreases dramatically. Suffering comes from resisting what you're observing. When you consciously observe reality, you're present to what is without resistance, not passive acceptance. Active observation. You see clearly, respond appropriately, and stay coherent regardless of circumstances. External situations might still contain challenges, but your internal suffering dissolves because you're observing from consciousness instead of reacting from conditioning. Benefit 3. Relationships transform immediately. When you observe people consciously instead of automatically, your relationships shift. You stop seeing them through filters of judgment, expectation, or past hurt. You observe them as they are. And people respond to being observed clearly by showing up more authentically. Conflicts decrease, connection deepens, not because people change, but because your observation of them changes. Benefit 4. Creative power amplifies exponentially. You realize you're not subject to circumstances. You're creating circumstances through observation. This isn't ego inflation. It's recognition of how reality actually works. And when you recognize your creative power, you use it consciously. You observe possibilities that didn't exist before. You collapse realities that weren't available through unconscious observation. Benefit 5. Health responds to conscious observation. Your body at quantum level knows wholeness. When you observe yourself at that level, instead of through diagnosis, symptom, or limitation, your biology responds. Not always instantly, not always dramatically, but consistently. Because matter follows consciousness, your cells are responding to your observation of them constantly. Conscious observation of health creates different biological outcomes than unconscious observation of illness. Benefit 6. Time becomes more flexible. You notice that time seems to expand or contract based on your observation. When you're present, time slows. When you're unconscious, it accelerates. You stop being ruled by linear time and start recognizing that time itself is something you observe into structure. This gives you more spaciousness, more capacity, more ability to do what matters. Benefit 7. Synchronicity becomes navigation system. Meaningful coincidences become your primary guidance system. You learn to read reality's feedback. When you're observing consciously and aligned with your highest timeline, synchronicities flow. When you're observing unconsciously, you encounter resistance. It becomes a language that shows you exactly what's aligned and what isn't. Benefit 8. You stop feeling like victim of reality. This is perhaps the most profound shift. You recognize that everything you're experiencing is matching your observation pattern. Not because you're causing bad things to happen, but because reality is neutral. It simply collapses into whatever observation is most coherent. Once you see this, blame disappears. Victimhood dissolves. You become responsible not for what happens, but for how you observe what happens. And that shift is liberation. These aren't future possibilities. These are the natural results of conscious observation, and they're activating in your life right now, whether you're aware of it or not. The more consciously you observe, the more obvious the benefits become. Now I need to share the ultimate truth that makes everything else make sense. The revelation that shifts observer effect from intellectual concept to lived reality. Are you ready? You are not the person observing reality. You are the observation itself, appearing as a person. Let me explain what this means, because this is the key that unlocks everything. Most people think they're an individual self, separate from reality, observing it from inside their head. Subject observing object, self-observing world, consciousness observing matter. This creates the illusion that observation is something you do from a distance, trying to affect what's separate from you. But quantum mechanics reveals something different. The observer effect shows that observer and observed aren't separate. They're aspects of one unified process. There's no observation without something being observed. There's no reality without observation creating it. They arise together simultaneously as one system appearing as two. You're not a separate self-observing reality. You're reality observing itself through the temporary perspective of individual form. The consciousness reading these words and the quantum field that allows these words to exist are the same system. One undivided whole, appearing as observer and observed through the magic of perspective. When you really understand this, not intellectually but experientially, everything about observer effect becomes obvious. You're not trying to observe reality into desired states. You are reality, observing itself into specific experience through the lens of individual awareness. There's no separation, no gap between you and what you're observing. It's all consciousness recognizing itself through different forms. This is what ancient teachers meant by "you are that," or "observer and observed are one," or "subject and object are not two." They weren't speaking metaphorically. They were describing the actual structure of reality that quantum mechanics is now proving scientifically. Consciousness isn't in reality. Reality is in consciousness. And you're not consciousness trapped in a body. You're consciousness appearing as a body, appearing as a person, appearing as an observer. The master key is this: stop trying to observe reality from outside it. Recognize that you are reality, and observation is how you experience yourself. When you observe yourself as abundant, reality manifests abundance because there's no difference between the observer and what's being observed. When you observe yourself as whole, reality manifests wholeness because you're not separate from the quantum field that's creating manifest experience. This is why conscious observation works. Not because you're changing something external, because you're recognizing what's already true at quantum level, and reality organizes to reflect that recognition. You're not creating new realities. You're choosing which of the infinite already existing realities you're experiencing by consciously selecting your observation. The paradox dissolves when you understand. There's no you trying to observe reality. There's only consciousness observing itself through the temporary illusion of individual perspective. And when that illusion relaxes, when you stop identifying as separate observer and recognize yourself as the observation itself, reality becomes infinitely fluid. You're not learning how to use observer effect. You're remembering that you are the observer effect. The collapsing of infinite possibility into specific experience that's happening constantly is you. Not something you do, something you are. Once you see this, you can't unsee it. And once you can't unsee it, reality becomes a creative playground instead of a fixed limitation. Because you're not subject to circumstances anymore. You're the consciousness that's creating circumstances through the simple act of observing. This is the truth that changes everything. And if you're still here, if you've stayed present through this entire transmission, you're ready to live from this truth instead of just understanding it intellectually. What you need to understand now is that your shift from unconscious to conscious observation doesn't just affect your personal reality. It affects collective reality, and your role in this shift is more significant than you realize. Here's how it works. Consciousness is a unified field appearing as individual perspectives. When one perspective becomes conscious, when one individual shifts from unconscious to conscious observation, it creates a morphic resonance in the field that makes that shift easier for all other perspectives. This isn't metaphor. This is documented phenomenon. Rupert Sheldrake's work on morphic fields showed that when animals learn new behaviors, other animals of the same species learn those behaviors faster, even without direct contact. The learning enters the field and becomes accessible to all. The same principle applies to consciousness. When you learn to observe consciously, you make conscious observation easier for everyone whose consciousness is entangled with yours, which is everyone. You're not just transforming your personal experience. You're creating a field pattern that others can entangle with and stabilize into. Every moment you observe consciously instead of reacting unconsciously, you're demonstrating that it's possible. And that demonstration ripples through the collective field. Think about the implications. Humanity has been operating in unconscious observation for millennia, observing through survival fear, tribal conditioning, scarcity programming, separation consciousness. That collective observation has collapsed realities of conflict, competition, exploitation, and suffering. Not because humans are bad, but because unconscious observation creates realities that match unconscious patterns. But when enough individuals shift to conscious observation, the collective field reaches a tipping point where conscious observation becomes easier than unconscious observation. The morphic resonance of consciousness exceeds the momentum of unconsciousness, and reality itself shifts at collective level. This is happening now. You're part of it. Your conscious observation contributes to the collective awakening not through teaching or convincing, but through simple being. When you hold conscious observation stably, others entangle with your field and experience what conscious observation feels like. They don't learn it intellectually, they absorb it energetically. You're not responsible for awakening others, you're responsible for observing consciously yourself. And the natural byproduct of your conscious observation is that it makes conscious observation more accessible to everyone. This is service at quantum level. Not doing, being. The more individuals who activate conscious observation, the faster reality shifts for everyone. Not because we're forcing change, but because collective observation determines collective reality. When critical mass shifts from unconscious to conscious, consensus reality reorganizes completely. Systems based on unconscious observation become untenable. Structures aligned with conscious observation become obvious. You're not here just for personal transformation.